Hi, welcome everyone to our deep dive on alignment this month. Here in May, we're focusing on things that how to live in alignment. So tonight, I'm Erin Hines, the co-owner and of Lifeline Solutions and spearhead of LiveWell. So I have with us tonight Ashley Durant, who is our guest, who may have seen in our yoga room, as she is a yoga instructor who does classes with us on Fridays. She has also led a lot of retreats, our holiday presence retreat, our women's empowerment retreat, and she is a intimacy, love, and relationship coach, also a creative writer. So Ashley is just always the dear to have, full of wisdom. Those of you who have seen her in her yoga classes or retreats know what a special treat she is and how much wisdom she always brings to us. And so we have her here talking on this tonight, as she has put together a desire-driven life program that was going to be a retreat that we're going to have in May. We didn't think about all the things happening in May, so we have punted that due to lots of people who want us to do that a little later. So anyhow, she's going to give us a taste of some of that tonight. And without further ado, Ashley, I'm just going to let you jump in and say anything you want to say about being here tonight.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be able to talk about alignment because it's the thing that I've really been working on, like Erin said, the most for, it feels kind of like the idea that I've been circling for a really long time. And I guess I wanted to start with a pretty simple, am I free to just jump in, or did you want me to say other stuff about?
You just do you, whatever, jump in.
We were just saying we're being very casual tonight. I wanted to start by just kind of defining what it is to be in alignment, in case that is a confusing term for anybody. I mean, maybe this is sort of duh for you guys, but being in alignment, the way that Erin and I have talked about it is has to do with being aligned with your own integrity. And so the process of desire-driven life, which is this kind of method that I've been working up for several months now, is a process of bringing you into alignment with your own values, with your own goals, and living in integrity that way, where kind of like the inside matches the outside of your life, and you feel fulfilled in that way. So one of the things that, one of the examples that I was thinking about in terms of kind of illuminating that for everyone is the example of being nice, air quotes, versus being kind. And this is also kind of, not coincidentally, this is also sort of how I came into a kind of current obsession with alignment. A story that is a really good example of this from my own childhood, that maybe as I talk, this will resonate for some of you guys. Maybe there's a child version of you that kind of has this similar thing. For me, my version of this was that my parents used to entertain a lot, and I would, at the end of the dinner party, be called downstairs to kiss all the guests goodnight and give all the guests a hug. And I actually kind of gladly did this because I recognized that it was going to get me a lot of kudos and love and attention in the moment. It didn't feel out of alignment to me as a kid. I didn't know any better. But my younger sister, when she came along, she refused to do this at all. She didn't feel comfortable with it. And she said no. And I thought, you don't get to say no. Do you get to say no? And that began like a whole life for me of just believing that you didn't get to say no. Like there wasn't any saying no, because if you were a nice girl, it was your responsibility to make everyone else really comfortable or to entertain everybody. And I spent, I'm middle-aged now, so is my sister. I've spent a very different life than she has spent, because as a child, she already knew that she got to say no. And somehow she has lived her whole life this way, almost effortlessly, because it just never occurred to her not to have boundaries. And so I think I always feel like a lot of us, especially women, really carry this sense of obligation to people please and keep everyone around us from feeling any discomfort at all, whether that's our children or our friends or, literally anyone. And it can really turn into ostensibly like a people pleasing personality, which becomes eventually over time all the little death by 1,000 cuts. You really end up divorced from whatever it was that you wanted in the beginning because you didn't really feel like that part mattered. The only part that really mattered was all of these externals, and even the validation that we get from pleasing people becomes more important to us than centering ourselves in our own values. So if you have ever been a person who was pleasing people to help them avoid any discomfort, or betraying yourself to keep relationships going, or saying yes to things out of guilt, that's a big one for me sometimes. Being hyper vigilant to everyone's feelings around you, but never wanting to upset people, but in the process, not being nice to yourself. Any of those kinds of things are examples of being nice. And it was stunning to me to realize in midlife that I could choose to be kind instead of choosing to be nice, that there was a difference. I often made a distinction, strangely, between nice and sweet. That's not a very important distinction in my mind anymore, but nice and kind. I mean, in kindness, I have no ulterior motive. In kindness, I am giving or doing things for other people because it feels good and because someone needs it, and it feels good to me to provide that to someone. It's not about pleasing someone else. It's about living my life and those choices in alignment with what I feel intuitively is the right thing. Either because I have a kind of a North Star, as I'm calling it, in the desire-driven life, or because in that moment I know my sense of myself and something is aligned with that. Erin, do you want to jump in? I feel like I've been talking like.
No, I just appreciate you starting the lead with that. I mean, because if we think about, I know one of the things that many, particularly, it looks like there's all women here tonight, but, many people struggle with that people pleasing notion. I think that, saying yes when you mean to say no is something that gets a lot of people into bad relationships, stuck in bad jobs, taking on more than they, want to, leads to resentment, leads to really a betrayal of yourself. So, I mean, I think the word that keeps circling around for me with that is, the authenticity of how we live and that integrity. But that's the other word that was coming up for me. I think just from our book study with the Nicola Pera, How to Meet Yourself. I mean, there's so much of that. Who am I really? And how can I locate that and become that? And, from what you were saying, it's like in those early years when those parts of you get shut down because you just agree to be whatever they wanted you to be, whoever the they was, the teacher, the coach, the parent, and then you get through life. And how often do you hear people say, who am I? Who am I? I don't even know myself. It's that identity crisis word that people use a lot, or midlife crisis, or, I think there's often this, who am I? I don't even know myself. And so I think that's kind of what's coming up for me as you're talking about this.
It's so true. And a thing that I think that a lot of us feel who are trained from an early age to honor other people over ourselves, where we essentially make ourselves invisible in the service of other people. A characteristic of that is over time, just exhaustion. I mean, just complete burnout, because you're spinning your wheels all the time. On behalf of something that you maybe aren't even that attached to. It's like,
Mm.
it's this empty churning through things that I think can begin to make you feel just like there's a void at the middle of your life. It may not even be as extreme as that, but just this sense of burnout and kind of like almost boredom. What am I even doing? That was very present for me. In my 40s, there were a lot of different moments where I would catch myself exhausted. And for what? Like, what was I even exhausted about? It felt like I couldn't even remember what I was doing half the time. And I really couldn't remember because none of it mattered to me as much as it would have mattered if I would have had more of a sense of self or what I actually wanted. My to-do
Right.
list was all what other people needed. And I'm glad you brought up integrity too, because I actually looked that word up when I was thinking about alignment, and I was looking at the etymology, and integrity actually comes from the Latin for soundness or wholeness or completeness. And the other little root that I found, I was laughing with Erin earlier. I'm an English professor, so I'm like I'm a word nerd. But the other little root of that is the same root as integer. If you guys remember in math class, integers are just whole numbers. And I love that idea because the integer is not a fraction, it's a whole number. And I think of that with integrity. I thought that was really neat to kind of plug in as a mnemonic device or something to remember. It's like you are a whole thing.
Mm.
Not a fraction of anything. And you don't have to be fractionated into all these various things that you design to, to please other people or whatever that might be.
Yeah. I love that. Yes, I have not heard that word broken down that way. And I do think that having the, as you said, seeing the math side too, it's like, yes, if I can only be one person, I can't be chopping myself up. And I think so many of us that, we do wear multiple hats. We do wear multiple roles. We're all not just we're a part of many things, but how can we be us in all of those things and not having to lose ourselves to be in any of that? So, I think it's that wholeness, completeness that we can bring if we can live in alignment, which I know is what your program is really about, is how to be whole. So, yeah, say more about that.
Well, as you were talking, what was coming up for me too, you're spinning off of that idea of the one, and that was also calling to my mind that image of the North Star that I keep coming back to as that kind of central focus of desire-driven life, and in which you can imagine if you're using the North Star as a metaphor, you are undoubtedly, each of us is undoubtedly a constellation of things. If we're using stars as examples, we contain just multitudes, which is beautiful. But you think about that North Star or whatever, if you have that one image in your mind's eye, that thing shines on, just like the sun or the moon or whatever, shines on you and as you move about your business, and so there are kind of different quadrants or different sections of your life, however you want to think of those compartments, where you have your professional life, you have your romantic life, a partnership with someone that you love, or your friendships, or your community, whatever, your church. You have all these different facets of your life, but that thing is so far above you and so unique to you and so centered on you that as you move about, you have that thing that is this available to shine on each of those situations, thinking of your life as down here and this higher, highest and best self, if you want to think of, you call capital S self, that thing doesn't shift. You move around, but that light is still there for each of those different things.
Yes.
Does that make sense as an analogy?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think the thing about integrity too, that I was thinking about earlier was like, and you and I have talked about aliveness versus happiness,
Yeah.
that notion of feeling, you know, for each of us, that North Star or what is central or what is our highest and best self is going to be different. Our values are different. But like, I want to say that it's not that I think that integrity creates or generates happiness the way that we think that we scramble about looking for happiness, but it might help generate aliveness, which the definition that you and I have talked about before of aliveness, happiness, maybe being this kind of, I mean, which happiness, not to buck happiness. Everybody does want to be happy. But like, if we think of happiness as kind of covering the surface of things or being more like, I don't know, it's kind of a one note thing, happiness. If we think of aliveness encompassing all of the elements of ourselves that we're going to be here for, like what brings us into a sense of aliveness is sometimes sadness in a necessary way. And so we think of aliveness being a more fulfilling, almost multi-layered, you know, in the way that we do contain multitudes and simultaneously. You can be simultaneously joyful and also move to tears. I mean, we contain a thing and its opposite every minute. And so I think of integrity as bringing us into aliveness, which to me, as I've gotten older, is way more desirable than only happiness.
Yes. I mean, there has to be, just like in a day, there has to be the dark and the light. And I think, yes, happiness insinuates that we're just only seeking light. And it's like, no, the dark, you know, the joy is only the other side of pain. So, I mean, being fully alive is being fully present with a person, fully present with myself and whatever emotion that is coming up for me, and how I learn not to abandon myself and I sit with myself, whatever the discomfort is. I mean, I think that's kind of where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's absolutely true. And that you're more likely to feel passionate about your work and tackle the challenges that you have to tackle, whatever they might be, with more fortitude and with more energy, if you feel like your actions are in alignment with your values or with this system. I don't want to call it a system, actually. I take that back. with whatever you set up for yourself as your highest and best self. And I think another piece of that, just another way of thinking of that was really surprising to me, that hooks back to our original nice versus kind example, is that I didn't realize that I could make choices from the inside out. It took me some time, a long time actually, to figure out that I was making all my choices from the outside in. Actually, what Nicola Pera always says is that people pleasing is very manipulative, because what you're doing is you're doing things in order to ensure that other people are going to react in a certain way. And if I started to break down my own decisions, what I realized was I am more focused on getting something from somewhere else, getting the love from somewhere else, getting the praise from somewhere else or whatever, than I was at all focused on the fact that something needed to come from me. There wasn't any me for it to come from, because I had shut that down for so long.
Yeah. So, you know, with that, I guess, not sure how much to get into it tonight. I know your whole retreat is going to be, yes, because of this, then how do we want to live? But I guess just in the Cliff Note version about, so because of that, because I've people pleased, because I've not been authentic, because I've said yes when I meant no, like, what is that finding the North Star transformation piece begin to look like? mean, I think many people, I mean, just from my perspective, come to therapy, inner coaching, begin to self-examine what is going on. And you might realize, okay, yes, here's what's happening. You don't know who you are. So you begin that exploration, maybe with someone alongside of you. What parts of that, I guess, would you like to get into, I guess, about just how that transformation, that discovery, what word am I looking for? You're the word girl. Discovery.
How does the discovery start to happen?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question. I mean, I think what you're talking about, which echoes what my first questions back in therapy and my midlife were, very much like, what do I even want? I mean, I always start with my coaching with, what do you really desire? Like, what do you most desire? And we work from that point. A lot of times people don't really even know what it is they desire. And a lot of times there's so many desires, and you kind of begin to do a Venn diagram of like, where do these things overlap, and what is there, like a trend? Is there like a thread that we can draw through all these things? What is really true? What's underneath what that desire is? We think money is our big desire or something, but what's underneath that? And keep going deeper. It's like, this from the work that you do, it's co-creating with somebody. Like, it's a creative act, actually. It's excavating, and it's creative to try to go in there and try to give a voice to those things, I think. But even just, and we do this in yoga a lot. It's like that, what is in your heart space, and like what's in that solar plexus space. And a lot of the desire driven life has to do with linking that heartfelt desire to this solar plexus chakra, which is your will. And how are you going to link this heartfelt desire that's so true for you to the will that's here just adjacent? It's kind of neat how they're right next to each other in the body. Externally, I think it has everything to do with boundaries. That's how you flex that muscle. For me, that's the most important. That was the most important muscle to flex, and to see myself do it and begin to trust that it was okay.
And as I'm hearing you talk, I mean, I think I'm just finding myself come back to that listening within, and I think part of, the meditation, breath work, yoga, all of those things, stillness is required, quietness is required to tune into that. What is it? And I think as many of us maybe do the externalization, stay busy, stay in conversation, keep, avoiding really being present, with ourselves long enough to even know, as you said, what's underneath that. And if that, then what's underneath that? Maybe I'm thinking I'm chasing money, and at the bottom, when I get to it, I don't want to be alone. And I see money as security or whatever that might be. So, I mean, you have to sit with the ache long enough to know what the desire is. And I think many of us avoid sitting with the ache.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. That is the truest of the true. It does take getting quiet, and it is, it's not only not fun, it's kind of boring. I mean, you feel like, what if nothing's showing up? I mean, that's a discipline that I think is, sometimes that's best done in the presence of other people too. Like, I love that in yoga class. I love to hold that space for people doing it. I think sometimes that moves things up to the surface a little more quickly if somebody else is in charge of your space and you can just let go. But that also brings up for me that idea that I've talked about before, which is inner and outer work, where the inner work is sitting in the quiet, even if 5 minutes, and then the outer work is things like boundaries, putting those things in place in the actions of your external life that set that up for you. And then it becomes a symbiotic relationship of trusting yourself.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that keeps coming up for me as you're talking is there's this process, this shedding that has to happen, right? This letting go of what no longer serves you. Once you begin to know what it is, then it's like, so the things that I've been doing to try to get to the thing that I really don't even realize I want now, like, so thinking about that letting go of the things that no longer serve you and the fear that comes up with that, and so many of the limiting beliefs that I think keep people trapped from letting go of the job or the relationship or the whatever it is that needs to be let go of, the behavior, the emotion, the many things that people struggle to let go of.
That is so true. And that makes me, I feel emotional just hearing you say that, actually. It is so, there's so much fear around letting go of, I mean, it's a whole identity, especially. Maybe nobody in this room right now has had that particular issue, but for those of us who have had the identity of being really people pleasery, there's almost like a grief to let go of that personality or that part of you. You don't have to, like, no bad parts. You don't have to like kill it off or anything, but it's who will you be if you are not attached to that story? Who will you be is the really scary thing. And letting go of some of the relationships that are toxic or whatever, there can be like a little bit of a fallout, obviously, in your life around setting those boundaries. And gosh, I mean, your nervous system is taxed by things like that. It is very, very hard.
Well, and it's wired for survival, right? And the very things that you're doing in your people pleasery are in your nervous system's belief keeping you alive. That running down the stairs to kiss your parents' friends goodnight was your nervous system saying, this is my survival. This is how I get the thing. This is how I get the food, the water, the love, the attention, the affection. So without that, your nervous system believes it won't survive. So, I mean, that visceral hanging on to the behaviors that your nervous system believes are good for you, even if you begin to realize they aren't so good for you.
Yeah, gosh, it's so deep. It can be really deep work. I would say that from the time that I showed up at the therapist's office and didn't know what I wanted in my life to the phase of feeling like I am centered in my life, it was about probably, it may have been more than 5 years, but not by a whole lot. So I actually think, looking back on it, that's not so long.
Right. Right.
And with little victories along the way, I guess I also just say, like, it feels possible to build a differently structured life. It feels so possible. It doesn't feel necessarily easy, but I feel so hopeful about it for everyone. And I feel so convicted about it for everyone. And especially, like I said, for women, I just feel so convicted about the fact that you get to own your life and feel like you have agency in your life, that you're the agent of change. You're the change maker. You're the one.
I love when you come back to that word. It is so impactful for so many, and so many lost agency. I was listening to the trauma conference today. Those of you know Body Keeps the Score. Bessel van der Kolk is essentially why Lifeline is set up the way it is. And that one of the presenters used the word that through our childhood, we developed this surplus of powerlessness. And I was just how he used that, because powerlessness is what comes up for so many. And then that's when when you can reclaim your agency and believe you have choice and power, the ability to say no, those things, it's just so impactful. And it just is leading me back around the circle to our relational trauma recovery retreat, our the empowerment, but also the attachment style deep dive and work that we brought into that relational trauma recovery, because the attachment styles is really, as you're talking about being attached to maybe our old story, there are so many ways and so many modalities for finding that agency and changing the story. And particularly today, psychodrama. So the acting out of the ideal self, or the working through some old relational stuff in role playing, and using a group of people that you're kind of calling upon to step in and help you through that. And I really, look forward to maybe doing some of that work and LiveWell, so that people can really see themselves being who this change is, through this acting out of this new version of self that so often is hard to step into. So I didn't say all of that quite so eloquently, but I'm so excited by it.
That is really exciting. So if you're acting it out, kind of, your nervous system does not really know the difference. So you're in essence like enforcing something, reinforcing some new like neural pathway type of thing each time you play that out. That's really neat. I love that.
So yes, what else? I feel like I might have got you off your train of thought you were on. Were there any other bullet points in mind that you had from your notes that are important to share before we open up for questions or comments about any of this? I'm looking in the chat to see if anyone has put in anything. Feel free to do so, but yes.
I have I did find this quote from David Brooks, who's this New York Times writer. And I thought this was really neat. So I'm just going to read through that. I don't have any other bullet points that I need to necessarily hit on, but this might help articulate things in a slightly different way. In the spirit of hoping that something resonates, maybe this would be the thing for you. So David Brooks says, if you live for external achievement, years pass and the deepest parts of you go unexplored and unstructured. It is easy to slip into a self-satisfied moral mediocrity. You grade yourself on a forgiving curve. You forgive as long as you are not obviously hurting anybody and people seem to like you, you must be okay. But you live with an unconscious boredom, separated from the deepest meaning of life and the highest moral joys. Gradually, a humiliating gap opens between your actual self and your desired self, between you and those incandescent souls you sometimes meet. I just thought that was so beautiful. And the idea that you figure as long as you're not obviously hurting anybody and people seem to like you, you must be okay. That we do just allow things to roll along. And we often forget, I think, that there's a you at the center of things, getting back to that idea of agency. If that makes sense, that you get to inhabit your life and not be, I don't know, that thing about not obviously hurting anybody and people seeming to like you, that those were the markers of being okay. It felt really true for me when I saw that. I was like, ooh, I've definitely been there.
That was so beautiful. And I don't know, when the end of the sentence had soul something spoken about, and it just reminded me of one of the slides in the presentation today in the work training I was in, and talked about, I'm just going to say, I'm going to use your coming down the stairs to give everybody the KISS example again, but how an incident or incidents happen and the soul abandonment, and then how therapy or this work is the soul retrieval. And I just love that soul retrieval concept of, it's like I've lost myself and I'm going to find myself. And, I just, again, I just was looking down at the Nicole Appears, the How to Meet Yourself workbook of self-discovery. I mean, she really does help walk you through that, understanding the nervous system, the discovery of you, and then, as you said, those new neural pathways of becoming the version of you that is in alignment. And, I would just encourage all of you, you might be in therapy, you might be working with someone, but taking advantage of these other resources, all the learning is so important in this journey. And I really do think helps accelerate your, the curve at which you do get to that place where you're feeling in alignment. And one of the comments that was shared, Leslie said Ashley's comment about it being 5 years before she really felt like she figured out what she really wanted, really encouraged me, reminds me to be patient with myself. And so, yeah, I do think that people have this notion that, oh, I get curious about something, I work on it for 6 months or a year, and it's supposed to, everything's supposed to make sense now. And, when I hear therapists present at conferences, often it's like, this was a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year process for some people. I mean, so I do think that we live in a fast-paced culture of instant results. And so we do lose sight, I think, sometimes of like what it's like to have that uncovering and that discovery. And it's, like I and most of you, quite honestly, it's a lifelong journey. We're always in a lifelong journey of meeting ourselves at different stages and transitions and seasons. And, so we're always in discovery.
That's so true. And the thing that I've been thinking the most recently, because even though I said that I am the most impatient person in the world, I'm so impatient in a very general way, like across the board, big and small ways. And I get frustrated with that still. And what I've been really settling into this year in 2023 is a kind of faith. I'm listening to other people say this, and I'm letting it sink in, which is that, like, it's actually true that it's happening the way that it should be happening has become like very central to me as a kind of spiritual belief. I struggle against it in my daily life, but it's like a backdrop for me now where I'm like, it might be okay that I'm, professionally or romantically, or I don't know, fill in the blank, a number of different ways where I'm not, quote unquote, where I want to be yet. And I'm really settling in, and I think I feel good about it finally, that like, it's cool. It's actually cool, because on the way, I actually am picking stuff up as I go. I'm picking up so much as I go. By the time I get to wherever that is, I'll have all these things that I got to pay attention to as I go. I think it's really been cool to actually settle into the idea that there's not a timeline. I mean, timeline, topic for another deep dive. Timeline is just a construct, right? Like we just invented, and capitalism gives us a timeline. All kinds of things give us a timeline from outside of ourselves that really didn't have anything to do with your soul. Literally has nothing to do with your soul's evolution or your progress on this planet. Nothing.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Says the girl who will be like super running around tomorrow doing honking at people in the car.
But it is important to remind ourselves that reframing of I'm right where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right now, or I wouldn't be here doing this, So if you're stuck in traffic, reminding yourself, okay, I'm right here because I'm not there getting into whatever that was supposed to be. Like I was supposed to be right here. So I might as well just be here.
That is it. That is it. You might as well just be here. Actually feels so good when you can get in line with that. It just feels so good to be like, you know what, screw it. I'm here. This is the spot, obviously, because here I am. It's just really nice. Even the bad stuff that's happening, I'm finally kind of like, not that I want it, but I can say, okay, I'm going to get something out of this one way or another, damn it.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad that you were here in this spot tonight, spending this evening with us and giving us a taste of your program and what we could look forward to and doing this work with you. So look forward to certainly a deeper experience with it. I will open up our audience for questions. We hit pause right quick. Thank y'all for being here at this deep dive, and I'm just going to pause this recording.